everyone. You're watching M4G Advocacy Media. This is the Journey Series video podcast. I'm Mark, a brown man with black and white beard, bald, black glasses. Today I'm wearing a red shirt in front of a painting and a shelf with some knickknacks. I'm a co-host of Journeys.
And I'm Crystal. I'm the other co-host, and I'm a white woman with a black and white striped shirt and bright glasses. And I have a brown background with a canvas painting and a lamp on this table.
Today we're speaking with Sheldon Lewis, who's coming to us from Montreal, who's a nonprofit partnership manager with Accessible, and he's going to talk to us about his journey and the work he does with Accessible. Hi, Sheldon.
Hi, Mark and Crystal. It's so good to be here.
Thank you
We're
for joining
grateful to
us.
have you.
Yes. Shall I describe myself for the other blind people?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
I am a white male with lots of hair and just a little bit of gray. I just turned 65 and I'm proud of that, although my body's feeling a little old. I have a polka dot shirt on and I'm a short guy. So I'm here to talk about my story. I find it's a very interesting story and lots of people will take note and hopefully some people might even be inspired. I was born with an eye condition that of a genetic foundation, and I've been slowly going blind all my life. I started off my life with lots of sight, and I'm 65 now, and all I can see is light. And wow, all I can see is light. All I want to do is see light. I wish the rest wouldn't disappear, but one day it will. But my journey started a long, long time ago. When I was 9 years old, I went to the doctor for the first time. It's an hereditary condition. And my mother and her family didn't know that it came from the genes. And basically, I was born. And then when I became 9, she started to find out why her father was blind and that it might be a genetic condition that was passed down hereditarily. So she took me to a doctor. And he told me, go to another doctor. And when I was 10, I visited an ophthalmologist named Don Boyaner here in Montreal. And he said to me, yes, you have choroideremia. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, it's a slowly degenerative eye condition. And if you're lucky, it'll make you blind later in life, or it could be sooner. It depends on how the disease progresses in your eyes. I said, oh my God. I turned to my mother and I looked at her and I said, Ma, how am I going to go into daddy's textile business? Because I always wanted to be in business with my father, even when I was 10. And I was crying and she was crying, and the doctor, he didn't know what to do with himself. And well, that was the end of that. No one really talked about it again for a long, long time. My mother felt really, really guilty. My father didn't know how to approach it. And a little later on, I think I was maybe 11 or 12. I went to sleepaway camp. And everybody went to sleepaway camp in Montreal. It was such a big thing to do. And I was really scared because I couldn't see at night. The first manifestations of my eye condition was night blindness. So while there's lights around, I'm okay, somewhat. But when there's no lights around, like in the fields or forest or around the bunks, chasing girls at night and stuff like that, it's really dangerous for me. So I was very, very nervous, and I didn't enjoy camp at all because of that. Every night was a trauma. The toilets were outside of the bunks,
Oh, wow.
and my parents didn't tell the counselors or the camp that I had this eye condition. So, and I wasn't brave enough to tell anybody. I didn't know I could talk to anybody about it because we were so quiet about it at home. And
Right.
so it was tough, and I many nights spent holding my bladder, and and because I didn't want to wake up the counselor at 4 a.m. To go
Right.
to the bathroom, and I couldn't even see to go outside, or something like that. And so that was my early days. And then when I went to high school, I still wasn't talking about it. So none of my friends knew. And it was tough because, we would go hang out in friends' basements like when I was 14 or 15, or we went away on a camping trip with a whole group, and nighttime came and I was done for. Like, I had to hide, I couldn't do anything with anybody else because I didn't know how to ask for anybody's help.
Mm.
Was a hidden disability that I only, started to understand what to do with much later in my life.
Mm.
So anyways, school managed, people went to bars. I didn't want to go. I couldn't see anything in the bar. I couldn't find the sofa. I didn't know where the bathroom was. I couldn't go to the bar and get a drink, stuff like that. So I stayed away as much as I could and didn't socialize in the same way as my friends were doing. That was about high school, and still nobody knew anything. Then I had an
Wow.
opportunity to go to Textile University in the United States.
Mm.
And well, sorry, let me
Wow.
back up a minute. I stopped going to sleepaway camp because of all those problems and started
Right.
working in the city,
Mm.
for my father's company in his various uh, factories or sales desks or whatever to get experience, because I was always going into that business. And so as I had a lot of fun, I hung out with my friends during the summer, but at night, I wanted to go home by the time 9:30 came along, which was when the sun was setting. And then I went to university in Philadelphia, which was fantastic for me, really good. I was lucky. I got a car. I drove down there, and get this, I didn't know how to read a map. And I not only didn't I know how to read a map, I couldn't figure out which way was north and south. And well, I had a friend who was older than me who had gone to this university, and he told me, take 87, go around New York, take the New Jersey Turnpike, and get off in Philadelphia Center City. And then you'll find out where you're going to the university. So I was all of 16 years old, got in a car during the day, wasn't at night, drove to Philadelphia. You know, I maybe shouldn't have been driving because I found out later on that my reflexes were delayed due to my eye condition by a tenth of a second, but maybe that was a tenth of a second too long. When you're traveling at 60 or 70 miles an hour, a tenth of a second is a long time. And I was one of those crazy drivers. So I get to school, and everything's okay. Still haven't talked about the blindness, and none of my friends knew anything. Had the same problems again at night and meeting women and et cetera, et cetera. That was a very hard time. I tried my best. I tried to stay in lighted areas, and I was very conscious of my situation. But school was fantastic. I became a member of a fraternity, and I became the rush chairman, built up a fraternity of 65 people together with all my brothers, and we brought in a sorority, sisterhood, and that made us the biggest fraternity on campus. It was great. It was, by the time I left 3.5 years later, I was so happy. I had achieved everything I wanted to achieve. But I still hadn't told anybody about my eye condition.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Then I came back to Montreal because I had an opportunity to open a textile factory within my father's group of companies. When I came back to Montreal, I was only 20. And the factory was going to be in Drummondville, which was a place about 70 miles from Montreal, and all French. And Montreal is a French and English community, and most of the rest of Quebec is mostly French, a French community. So I was at a second loss, but I managed. I opened a factory. I learned how to make yarn because it was a yarn mill. I learned how to do cut and sew for drapery and bedspreads. I learned how to knit fabric on big knitting machines. I had about 100 employees who worked for me, and I was only 21 or 22. It was, you know, a time of my life that was especially difficult and a real challenge. I rose up to the challenge. I like challenges. I didn't have a choice. We made all these investments, and I was the guy on the spot, and I had to make it happen, and I did.
Wow.
And I'm proud of myself for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would be too.
Yeah, it was great. But every weekend, I worked from, let's say, 7 a.m. till 12 at night. I had to close the factory at 12 at night because I didn't have any manager. And so I had no life, and I couldn't go to the nightclubs in Drummondville because, number one, everybody spoke French, and number two, I couldn't see. So I drove to Montreal every weekend, and I drove around my old neighborhood, reminiscing and, remembering all my old friends and blah, blah, blah. They had a lot of people had left Quebec by that time. So a lot of people that I knew didn't live in Montreal anymore. But one day, while I was driving around, I stopped at a friend's house, and we were sitting out on the sidewalk, and these two women roller skate by, and one of them says, "Hey, Sheldon, how you doing? I'm making a singles party tonight. Do you want to go?" and my friend said, "No, I'm not going." And I said, "Hey, what the hell? I might as well go, right?" So I said, "Sure, I'm coming." And I didn't know what I was going to do because of the darkness part, and
Right.
it was going to be in a bar, and so I ended up going. And good for me, there was two parts of the party room, a well-lit part, and there was a dark part where the bar was. And what I decided to do was I wore a shirt and a tie and a sports jacket and gray pants, and I looked all, spiffy, and I wanted to make a good impression and find my, a girlfriend. And I walked into the bar and I saw someone there with red hair. I could see red hair, but I couldn't see like their face or bodies
Right.
or anything
Right.
like that. So I
Mhm.
walked over to the person with red hair and I said, "Hi, you know, I, I, I think, like I thought she was somebody else." And she said to me, "I'm not that person. I don't know you." And I walked away all like humiliated and flustered. And I got a drink anyway, so that was lucky. And I walked back out into the lighted area and I saw her standing there. So I went over to apologize, and it turns
Oh,
out that she knew this girl that also had red hair that I thought she was. And when I told her name, she said, "Oh, yeah, people used to call us sisters." So we started off our conversation, and she became my future wife.
oh,
That's how I met my wife when I was 23, and we got married when I was 24. The
that's
first thing I
just,
had to tell my wife when I met her after 3 weeks, when I knew this was a serious thing, was about my eye condition. I told her, and she said to herself, "Boy, I know this one blind guy. I'm going to call him." And so she calls up that guy, and it turns out to be my cousin. And
oh,
that man was also blind from the same eye condition. And he was their family's insurance broker. That's how small Montreal's world is. And
yeah.
so she got the lowdown from him. And and then, well, I started in business and things were rolling along, and the mills were there in Drummondville. And then I decided I needed to go for a new diagnosis. And there was this famous doctor in Boston named Elliot Burson at the Massachusetts Eye and Ear Hospital. And he took me in, and he told me, "No, you don't have retinitis pigmentosa," because that's what my mother always called it. "You have choroideremia. So that's better. You'll go blind later in your life. Isn't that good?" I was so happy. I walked out of his office. I went down the street. I did the leprechaun skip, when you try and touch one foot to the back of your other leg. I couldn't do it very well. I met this guy who was begging for money. I gave him $20. You're talking about a
Oh,
1985 or something. I
mhm.
just and so I was really happy about that. And then as my vision started to deteriorate quite a bit, my brain still thought that I could see a lot, but my peripheral vision went first. So basically what that means is everything around this area of my eyes or underneath or on top was becoming blurry or had pockets of no vision and had pockets of some remaining vision. So but my brain thought I could still see, so I was still driving and until I was 30. And basically I had to give it up. I had had too many accidents, and I got really nervous, and I realized that I couldn't see enough, so I gave up driving. That was really, really hard. I was very much into driving. I was very much into cars. I loved speed. I loved acceleration. I loved the way the car's parts work together with each other. I knew every car on the street. I knew the sound of the cars. I could identify them by their sounds. I loved cars. I had to give that up. Then, you know, by that time, I had already had children, 2 kids. And I remember my son was 4, and the other one was just born, and he's also a boy. And I had to tell my wife had to tell my son, "Take daddy's hand. He needs some help to see." And I looked at him and thought, Oh, that's so hard of a message to hear. But thank God that we started at that young age to tell him about and them about my eye condition and my eyesight, because now for them, blindness is just like a normal part of my life and part of my life with them and their kids. And they're so helpful, and so is my wife. And it's amazing how much my family has rallied around me. So then, in when I was 34, I unfortunately contracted arthritis. And until that time, I was still able to do sports. Like, I love skiing, I love biking, I love sailing, um, I liked racquetball, uh, tennis sometimes, and play baseball with the guys on the Saturdays. I couldn't play very well, but because I couldn't see the ball very well, but that's besides the point. I tried, and
Mhm.
by that time, people still didn't know I had this eye condition. Very, very many people didn't know. And so when I got arthritis, I really had to quit all the sports because it was too hard on my body to exert, with too much energy, hurt my joints too much. And so I've gone through a lot of grieving about loss, and I've had to lose a lot of things in my life. I still have a lot, but I've lost a lot. And the trick now for me is to find what I can still have fun and enjoy and get happiness out of doing. So it's different for everybody else. They could just go do what they want, just look and see and go. And I have to think and figure out how I'm going to do it and how it's going to be, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Then I lost a lot of sight during my 30s, but my brain still thought I could see. So I didn't adopt the use of a white cane until I fell and broke my leg. I was in my 40s. And well, in the meantime, I was doing business. I was traveling all over the world, China, England, United States. I had a lot
Wow.
of people working for me. I had a big business, and I was the product development manager, and it was a family business. My father was in it. My son later came into it, and but
Mm.
not in the 30s. That was much later on.
Mm.
So in my 40s, I fell and broke my leg on the way to see the cars that lined up on one of the streets in Montreal around the time of the Grand Prix. All these fancy cars would line up, and everybody would come down to this closed off street, and the bars would be open, and everybody would be having a big party. And so I was on my way there, and I was in a taxi, and we were stuck because there was a football game, and all the spectators were going to the game. So I said to myself, I'm going to get out of the taxi. I didn't want to sit here and pay like an extra $10 to watch all these people go by. So I paid them off. I got out of the car, and I started walking there, and I went through a parking lot that was on 2 levels, but I didn't know it was on 2 levels. And I remember at the last second before I fell that I was looking at someone down over there, and he was very small, and he wasn't at my level. And then I tripped over the little 6-inch step that they had and fell down 3 feet, broke my leg, rolled over. Unlucky, I didn't hurt myself worse.
Yeah.
Phoned my wife, told her I can't come to dinner. I just broke my leg.
Mm.
And it wasn't a good thing. It was a hard recovery to make. I had surgery and stuff like that, but I quickly adopted the white cane after that. And using a white cane for blind people is it's the last thing we want to do. It's humiliating. It means we have to ask for help. It makes us stand out in a crowd. It's like nobody who's going blind slowly, like in my case, wants to use the white cane until they have to. And intelligence says I should have adopted it sooner. Stupidity says I waited too long. And well, anyways, I started to use the white cane and I've been using it ever since.
Mhm.
And now I had to close my textile business, which was, as I said, kind of large. It spanned over 6 continents. I traveled 15 weeks a year. I couldn't see in the airports. Every time I went to the airport, it got darker and darker. Seems like they were turning down the lights, but it was more like my eyes were getting worse and worse. And I got to a point when I get to buying the products that the company was going to be selling, I had to ask other people for help to describe. And then when I got to the sales call, I couldn't really present the products that I was selling because I didn't know how to describe them in a way that the customers would understand. And then what was really frustrating was when the customers would toss around my 5 or 10 fabric samples and say, this one is good. No, I don't like that one. And how much is this one? And, I couldn't follow that at all. So being blind and a textile salesman didn't go together for me. And during the time of the last 10 years of having my textile business and what I thought was eyesight, I was thinking, how can I give back to the community? And it was difficult to figure out how to do that because the business kept me to the grindstone. And I didn't have any time for, extracurricular activities, which I should have made time for, but I didn't. And in 2018, we closed the family business, and I found myself with not too many skills, only 62, thinking about what am I going to do next? I didn't feel ready to retire. I didn't feel like I was, done, and I still wanted to contribute. So I started to reach out to my local rehabilitation center, picked up some volunteer work for donor thank you calls and a little bit of donation solicitations, and COVID rolled along, so we couldn't really go there and do activities, in the center and stuff like that. But finally, I got really lucky. They trained me very well at that center to use my screen reader. And that's how I found Accessibility. And so I can get into the last part of my life afterwards, or I can continue right now. What do you prefer?
If you don't mind, if we can go back to when you were discussing your children and the positive implications of how you taught them early on about your blindness and what that entailed. I definitely see a major difference in a generation that's able to explain and gently teach children that there's nothing wrong, but this is what they need, and then a generation that's like, nope, we're just gonna hide them away. Don't look at that. Don't, there's a definite, and it's so awesome. Some of the kids today are a lot more receptive, and it makes a huge difference.
The families are lucky that
Mhm.
when they can talk about this stuff, either for the children or for the parents, whoever has the problem, it's really fantastic when the family can all rally around each other and support each other. And
Right.
it makes everything just natural. Nothing is what do we do now or something like
Yeah.
that. No, it's
Yeah.
all my
It's
we went to a restaurant the other day, and my 2-year-old granddaughter said she had to go to the bathroom. So I said, "Do you want me to take you?" And she said, "Sure." So I said, "Give me your hand." So she took my hand. Now she doesn't know how to lead me to the bathroom, and I can't lead her to the bathroom. So my son, he took my other arm and kind of pulled on my sleeve to guide me, go this way, go that way, do this, do that. And it was like, that's fantastic. And then when we left the restaurant, the grandchildren were fighting over my white cane to play with it. That was
yeah.
so nice. That was like
Yeah.
really special.
Yes. It makes a huge difference in not only the person with the disability's life, but also theirs, because it's not so awkward for them. And it's ingrained into their upbringing of what, their future is going to be. And more people, as we've talked about before, more and more people are going to be disabled. And, and it's almost a must it, that we have to get everybody, not just children, used to that kind of life.
I
Um,
know. And it's a wonderful thing.
yes.
Yeah, and that's you know, there are obviously good and bad sides to technology and our globalization and stuff like that. But that's one of the good things, is that it's in some ways opened our eyes and made some of us realize how similar we are, even though we're in different parts of the world, or and how
Right.
much our experiences are the same, and given us an understanding of
That's a very interesting thought, because it's really true that everybody everywhere is the same, no matter what race they are. And
Right.
it's unfortunate that people can't see that. It's hard. Like in my
Yes.
case, people are scared to talk to me. And an unintended consequence of being blind is that people get scared of me. So when I'm with my wife, they'll smile to her or they'll talk to her. They won't come over and ask me any questions. And that's what technology helps to understand, that everybody has the same issues, but it doesn't mean that people are going to accept what those issues are and actually, live with them, or
Right.
knowing about them, or being nice about them.
The sadness of that is that, there are so many issues and problems around the world and in our respective countries, US and Canada, um, that need to be solved. And, um,
No one is.
world is hurting themselves by pushing smart minds away because they look different, talk different, see different,
Yep.
whatever it might be, you know.
Yep. It's really true. That's the one good thing about the remote world of today, is that some people who wouldn't normally be able to go and work can actually find themselves work, either being self-employed or finding work from employers who are much more easy or relaxed about hiring them on a remote basis than if they have to come to the office.
Right.
right. And the other good thing is, even if you do, it's not like a time where if everyone rejects your resume in a given city, you're not restricted to that city. You can apply for a job across the world if you want to.
It's true. Yeah. So inconsequential, uh, sorry, unintended consequences
There you go.
are very obvious and sometimes hidden. Like, for example, the other day I was talking to someone and I was with my wife, but I wasn't looking at the person's face. I was looking away from them. And she told me that they looked nervous and they weren't sure what to do because I wasn't looking at them. I thought it was, I wasn't, interacting with them in less of a manner because I was looking away, but it made them very nervous. So maybe they weren't interacting with me in at their fullest potential because they were nervous. And then what do they say to me? Hey, why don't you look at me? If they if they would just speak or say a word, then I would know I was looking in the wrong place and try to adjust my line of sight,
Mm.
so to speak.
I'd have to say that on a level of not blindness, but like Mark and I have ataxia, which is it affects your muscles, and that includes your speech muscle, your esophagus, and all these muscles in your throat, and your vocal cords, and your eyes as well. So a lot of times, our eyes might, when we're tired or sick or, whatever, if there's other stresses going on, our eyes might have more of a hard time focusing on what we want to, and it might not even be both eyes, it would just be one, but
Right.
still it makes people uncomfortable. So that's the situation of maybe you can tell us verbally, but can't do anything about that. It's not that we can control.
Right.
So there's a different. I know that's not what you're talking about, but that's another side of it.
Absolutely, it is. Reminds me of another unintended consequence is I was talking to this gentleman with a neural disorder, and he told me, I love talking to you, Sheldon, because you can't see my eyes twitching and my face twitching, and and you're not getting turned off by all the things that I'm doing, and I this is great, I love it, he says to me.
Yeah.
So there's unintended consequences on both sides, good and bad, from everything that we do, whether we're disabled or not.
Yeah. Crystal and I have talked about this, and I guess everybody in our community kind of goes through this. And how did your friends and family react when they finally, like the ones who didn't know you had this condition, when they finally learned that this was a thing?
That was a good question. I was 33, I think, and I had to go pick up my sister in Philadelphia. So I flew there, and I met with all my friends from the fraternity, and I told them, and they were shocked. They couldn't believe it, but none of them have ever. Anytime I ever see them, they're offering their help, and they're not turned off by it at all, or they're not, made nervous from it, or it's been. I was really well received. I was very thankful for that, and still am. I'm still friends with them.
I love
How has it been for you?
Oh goodness. It's been a mixed bag of a lot of support in the beginning, you know, and then eventually people started doing their own thing. And, I was in like I was doing work. It was more like being a robot.
Mm,
And like we talked about as well, that, you go to work and, you do, like, for me, web design, but real in actuality it was more about checking a box
right.
and me being disabled. So they were doing a good thing.
Mm,
And I'm not saying that I didn't get a lot of benefits and a lot of skill in that area at that time, but it was definitely not the kind of work I wanted to do helping people and the kind of people I wanted to be around. And so, I'm working on finding those people and
mm,
doing the kind of work I want to do going forward.
mm. I understand that. That's where Accessibee's been a fantastic employer for me. Everybody is so supportive. I love this team and the people I work with, and I'm really lucky I met them. They're the 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 first another job that I had after I closed the textile company. The owner had neuropathy, and he couldn't feel his feet, which I can't. It's so hard to imagine, but uh, I thought I had this special bond with him, but it didn't work out that way. He was all business, and I guess maybe people are always all business, but friends are friends if you're lucky.
Yes.
Well, yeah, well, sometimes, I mean, I'm definitely, there's, sometimes when you're not ready to admit certain things about yourself, like because you won't be accepted, tend to mask things. And maybe it was his way of just putting up a brave face so that no one could see his vulnerability. And, because that sort of stuff, people can tend to exploit that stuff if you have the wrong people around you.
Yep,
Yes, definitely.
you're
Yeah.
right.
A
Right about
lot of
that.
people, and that's a huge conversation in the disability community. When and do I even admit or disclose that I have this and this and this? Because, I mean, when you can't hide the things visually, that's one thing. But when you can, and you have the opportunity to not show people who you are, it can have an advantage. Well, that's what people thought, but I would argue that it having a disability and seeing the way people treat you, having a visual disability is evident of what kind of people they are and what kind. That's like I was telling you a minute ago. Those are the kind of people I want to deal with and who I want to converse with.
Hmm.
You know,
It's interesting you should say that, because and I split people into three kinds of categories. Ones who don't know how to help me, ones who are want to help, but they're semi there and semi not, and ones who really help a lot. And it's interesting how people, but I take help from anybody. It's just interesting how people fall into categories, and I just have to recognize them for what they are and watch out for myself if they're from, that first category, and know that I'm in really good hands if they're from the third category.
right, right.
That was a good lead in back from our break, Crystal?
It sure was. We definitely needed it.
For sure. Stay tuned. We'll be airing part 2 of this interview next week.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We appreciate it.
Bye.